Everybody, thank you for coming and taking the time. My name is Mike Morin. I am a customer success manager here at Club Benchmarking, specializing in compensation and benefits. I joined the team less than 6 months ago. Prior to that, I was down in Florida at Jupiter Island Club, working there for a few years. I was also at Ball Peak Colony Club up in New Hampshire, working there. And most recently, I was managing a city club in downtown Boston. I'm joined here with my colleague.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary Callahan. I've been with Club Benchmarking for just over 1.5 years now. I was brought on actually to focus on developing the compensation and benefits platform, so I'm excited to share with you all what we've been doing over the past year.
So again, we're really excited about today and to have you all here. We know your schedules are very busy. We know you have clubs to run, and time is really of the essence. But today we're going to look into a case study that we have been doing. So we have been working with a large golf club recently to help develop our compensation benefits platform and the study and the research that we've been doing. So today we're going to quickly go through our report methodology, so kind of the story of where we started and where we are now. And then we're going to dive into that case study, so going over the payroll benefits of Club XYZ, go into the human resource expense, and then some things that we've learned and that we've taken with or gone with and evolved to, and then we'll start answering some questions at the end.
Okay, so a quick recap for those of you who are a little less familiar with the changes we've been making over the past year. It was about 1.5 years ago, just before I started, that a few of our members reached out to us and asked to make some improvements. These were HR professionals in the club industry who had prior experience in hospitality and the energy industry, which are highly standardized and benchmarked industries. So these were people who came to the club industry having been used to having an abundance of information available and at their fingertips. But when they came to the club industry, they noticed a gap in the overall industry reporting and in our reporting. As a result, we have spent a lot of time working with those HR professionals to improve our own benchmarks and analysis, and there were really 4 goals to those improvements. Some of the things they wanted to see, the first being that they were able to benchmark the most current compensation information that's available. The second being they asked that the reports be a little more transparent and easier to interpret. Third, being the ability to conduct a year-over-year trend analysis in compensation. And then finally, a more strategic look at staffing in clubs, which is where we'll really dive in today. One question that we kept coming back to and club managers kept bringing up to us, either because they were asking it or they were being asked this, is are we staffed at a level that balances our club's financial results with our members' service expectations? So we sort of went with that question. And our first test of these changes and our new data gathering was last August. Some of you might have heard of the advanced compensation study that we did. That was where we really just learned how to collect information from the club's payroll system directly on every position in the club and collect that information and organize it. The result of that study was something I'm very proud of. It's actually a standard organizational chart for the industry. It breaks the club industry down into 13 standard departments, 155 standard positions, and then 4 standard employment statuses. So this next slide here is showing you sort of the evolution of our reporting. The foundation of having that standard organizational chart has allowed us to really provide some clarity within our positions and better understand the compensation for each position. So a couple of things we did quickly to make the reporting a little bit easier. You'll notice down in the bottom left there's a demographics table. This now tells you exactly how many clubs are included in the peer set, as well as the number of employees or respondents that we have. included. Up at the top, you'll see your club's range. We've expanded that to allow you to benchmark your entire club's pay range for each position compared to the background range. And we've actually expanded that background range so you can now see compensation from the 10th percentile to the 90th percentile, which is pretty standard in other industries. Lastly, we've added this column on the right. This really makes the data much more transparent. You can see exactly how many of the respondents in the given position are receiving each component of compensation.
So as Mary said, we continue to evolve and learn from this. If you're looking down on the bottom right, there's a pie chart there. So this is the percentage of standard titles by pay basis. So essentially, out of those 155 standardized titles that we've come up with, 26% of them are always paid hourly, 16% of them are always paid salary. But then we found out that 58% of them vary from club to club. So for example, assistant golf pro, if you're looking to hire assistant golf pro, that's something that varies pretty frequently. So some clubs pay them hourly, some their salary, some are only commission based and lessons based for payment. And so as you see here, even though we are trying to standardize this and make this accurate, it shows that not everything can be standardized, such as pay rate.
And I'll just add quickly, I forgot to mention this, we have altered the numbers that you see on the screen to protect the privacy of our clubs. So just so you're aware.
So next is a way that we've found an awesome way to show a club's pay structure or pay strategy. So this is a really quick glimpse and a fast way to see where you line up in the benchmarks for paying. So we've had clubs reach out and say, we definitely want to be paying at the median for the industry, or some clubs at the 60th percentile and 75th, to really set them at the higher mark and be even more competitive to draw in the best employees. So this is something that we developed. Here on the left, you'll see this is half of the hourly positions in a list. This first row of columns is the club's median pay rate. So for example, a server at a club, you could have up to 20 servers. That is the median pay basis for that server. Next, this line chart shows where they fall in the background data, their percentile. And then to the right is that background data, so the 25th percentile, the median, the 75th, and the number of respondents. So this is a great way to really capture that real quick and kind of show and present to the board and other managers where you fall in your pay strategy. Another thing that we've learned also for benchmarking hourly employees, we found it most accurate and efficient to benchmark similar club cost of living index. So for example, this set of employees fall between the 93 and 98th cost of living index. And then for salary staff, we've been benchmarking based on total compensation with similar clubs and similar total operating revenue. Again, as Mary said before, any of these compensation benchmarks aren't fully accurate, so please don't use these for your own need. We're more than happy to help generate these for you if you are looking for these benchmarks.
Okay, so as we dive into the case study that we did with Club XYZ, again, the question that kept coming up was, are we staffed at a level that balances our club's financial results and the members' service expectation? So this club that was working very closely with us in particular is a large golf club, and so the peer set we used for their analysis was large golf clubs around the country with an operating revenue of over 14 million. Some of the slides in this presentation do show industry metrics, just to provide some context.
So to get us started and kind of go about the evolution of club benchmarking, one thing that Ray and Russ have found is the payroll ratio has a direct correlation to a club's operating results. So that's something, if you don't know, that's something you should go find out right after this. To explain what we're looking at, so the payroll ratio is a percentage of the total operating revenue. So you'll see here, this has been pretty consistent throughout the last 6 years. The 25th percentile falling at 53%, the median being at 56%, and the 75th being at 60%. Just below that, you'll see the Distinguished and Platinum clubs and the operating result. So the Distinguished and Platinum clubs is basically categorizing the clubs that offer the top service, the top amenities, everything that you can imagine being the top. And it shows that even with those amenities and their offerings, they still fall and have the same payroll ratio. And similar to clubs that have a 53% or 53 payroll ratio, they generally end up with an operating result positive close to 250,000. So we believe you really cannot start to understand your labor expense without knowing and looking at your payroll ratio to start.
Okay, so we began our analysis following that train of thought. We took Club XYZ's payroll ratio and compared it to the payroll ratios for large golf clubs over 14 million in revenue. And you can see that the breakpoints are pretty similar. The 25th and median end up being 1 percentage point higher, but the 75th is the same. Following the trends, we notice that Club XYZ has a payroll ratio of 53%, which would indicate that they are operating with an operating surplus as they're in the lower quartile. Looking back over time at this club's payroll ratio, they have historically had a low payroll ratio, and that's because this club actually budgets for a 3% annual increase in their labor expense each year. So they are managing that expense. So at this highest level, it does appear that their labor expense is balanced with the club's financial results. Looking at their staffing levels in the top left, they are again at or just above the median. They're at the 57th percentile with 177 full-time employee equivalents. That's where, to calculate that, we took all of the hours worked by every employee at the club and divided them by 2,080, which is the standard number of hours in 52 40-hour work weeks. So again, looking at their full-time equivalents, you can see that they're just above the median for this peer set, which means that they are staffed according to the size and complexity of their organization.
So to dig a little deeper, as Mary said, they are staffed at the median, so it's not that they're understaffed causing their payroll ratio to be a little lower. So the chart on the right is showing us their cost per full-time equivalent employee. So that blue line on the top shows their total cost per full-time equivalent employee. That yellow line is the salary and wages, and this red line here is their payroll taxes and benefits. So seeing that that's a little lower, to put that into context, this club actually has a different healthcare pay structure. They offer a high deductible and cap the expense for the employees, ultimately subsidizing their payroll expenses and cutting the costs on both ends. So again, to continue on with the healthcare and to drill even deeper, before club benchmarking really only captured from trial balances on the finance and ops sides the total healthcare insurance expense and the payroll taxes and benefits as a whole. From our evolution and research, we have found out that most clubs on their trial balances and in their finances itemize and separate employee meals, retirement and 401k, workers' comp insurance, and other employee benefits. So since learning this and seeing this over the past 2 months, we've actually been remapping and capturing these data points so that we can better figure out the fiscal responsibility and results of a club. And so again, this is how we've been learning and evolving as we go. We really feel that this view allows clubs to see a balance of benefits that they're offering and strategically place them.
Again, looking at Club XYZ's benefits expense breakdown on the left, you can see that their health insurance expense is below the average or norm for the industry. It's 29% as opposed to the 37% that you see on the right. Because all of this is a proportion of a whole, their payroll taxes and the other parts of the pie, as we'll call it, tend to look a little bit larger. So it's not that they're spending that much more in payroll taxes, but it's more that they're spending that much less in health insurance. I'd like to draw your attention quickly to the retirements, which are 5% of their benefits offerings. Diving a little deeper into that, we're able to explore the offerings for benefits offered by, we're able to explore the benefits offered by clubs, specifically the 401k. We could see in this peer set that 100% of the clubs offered a 401k to their employees. On the left, we show a chart that shows you the number of months of employment before which an employee is eligible to participate in that 401k benefit. Club XYZ does offer that eligibility to employees in line with their peers, which is employees are eligible 6 to 12 months after employment. And they also are in the norm for their matching. Club XYZ matches 4% of the employees' contributions to their 401k.
So now to take a step back and switch over to the human resource expense of clubs. So what we have here on the chart on the left, you have the labor expense breakdown by department, and on the right you have a full-time equivalent breakdown by department. So these two pie charts are representing the industry as a whole. So labor expense breakdown by department is a percentage of each department's cost or expense in the total payroll. On the right, it's the full-time equivalent breakdown by department. So that's the number of full-time equivalents in each department. And again, a full-time equivalent is calculated by taking the total number of hours in each department and dividing it by 2080, which essentially represents 52 40-hour weeks. So as we look over here at the left, some things that kind of stand out. You can see G&A is a pretty decent size of the chart. G&A meaning general administration. So they represent 14% of that payroll expense, but looking over here on the right, you see it's really only 6% of their full-time equivalents for the staff. And you can tell that many executives often make more than the rest of the team. So that's why it's such a larger pie chart, but such a less amount of employees. Also with food and beverage, you see 35% representing the total cost. And then on the far right, you see that it's really 41% of their staff. So we're starting to look and see, we've seen it pretty frequently that G&A and food and beverage represent about 50% of the club's full-time equivalent, but also their payroll expense. I'm going to now go to the next slide, which is Club XYZ. So looking at this and comparing that, it's pretty similar. So you can see on the right, the only difference is because it is an exact club, we can show you the number of employees that represents. So that's what that number is in the parentheses. I'm going to flip back to the industry one and do a little comparative. So right now we are on the Club XYZ. Again, these are the same pie charts that you saw before. So looking at the far left, you see food and beverage represents 35% at this club. G&A represents 14%. Golf ops represents 12%. So if I slide back up to the industry, you see it's very similar. So food and beverage 35%, G&A 14%, and golf ops is 11%, which is just 1 percentage point less or 1 percentage point more than what the industry has. So from this, we can see that the club is pretty proportionally staffed to the industry. Also seeing all the other departments pretty proportionally staffed as well.
Another view we were able to take on club staffing as we were doing our research was by what we are calling employee demographics. Really, we just look at the staffing in the industry or in a specific club based on 3 things. First being the pay status, second being the Fair Labor Standards Act status or FLSA status, which says whether an employee is exempt from overtime pay or non-exempt from overtime pay. And then lastly would be by those 4 standard employment statuses that we've observed in the industry. As a whole, we've received just over 100 payroll reports now from clubs that range between about 2.5 million in revenue and now over 45 million in revenue. And that includes golf clubs and non-golf clubs. So all of that information combined, we have a database of over 33,000 employees, which is pretty large. It's very exciting to see. But because of that, I believe that this really is now a representation of the industry and some of the norms that we will see going forward. As you can see, 87% of club staff are paid on an hourly basis, while 13% are salaried. 87% are non-exempt from overtime pay, while 13% are exempt. And then lastly, you'll see that 74% of club staff are employed year-round, and 26% of club staff are employed seasonally. So now looking at the peer set that we used for this analysis in the top left, you'll see that these trends are very consistent. The percent of staff that are paid hourly and are non-exempt from overtime pay are slightly higher at 89% compared to the industry norm of 87%. And they actually have a slightly smaller proportion of year-round staff at 72% compared to the 74% that we saw on the last page. Looking at Club XYZ's employee demographics on the right, we can see that compared to their peers, they are in the norm for their staffing. They're just off by 1 percentage point on their pay basis and their exempt status. This club is less seasonal. They actually employ 6% more year-round staff than their peers do. And so digging into that, we learned that this club very recently, over the past couple of years, has been expanding their year-round offerings. So they have, it would make sense that they have more year-round staff.
Awesome. So we're going to go into our next approach to answer that question. So again, is the club XYZ staffed at a level that balances the club's financial result and the member service expectations? So we started to look into tenure. The Club XYZ asked us to look into overall club tenure, but also departmental tenure, which you'll see on the next slide. But to explain this to you, so here we have 2 lines of bar graphs. The one on the front is the club average and the industry. You'll see the one on the back is the club in our case study. So looking at this at a glance, you see that the 0 to 5 years of the staff turnover is pretty high in clubs, but a little higher in Club XYZ. And so we're going to put that into perspective and give you some context. So now I'm going to switch to the front of the house club tenure in the food and beverage department. For those who are unfamiliar with it, so front of the house represents all staff in the food and beverage department that aren't necessarily in the kitchen. So that's your servers, your bus staff, bartenders, captains, dining room managers, all that. So you see here, this really jumps out. The 0 to 5 years shot up from what we were just looking at. And that's because this club recently expanded and increased their offerings for their dining facilities within the last 2 years. So they've recently done a lot of hiring to maintain that volume. And so that's what that spike is right there. If you were to actually look at a fitness department one as well, because fitness is relatively new in clubs, it's really gone crazy in the last 10 years, you wouldn't see as much of a good distribution in tenure. Again, because it has been around in city clubs and whatnot, but it's really, country clubs are really taking a hold, and it's caught on like wildfire since the last 10 years or so. Another correlation that we're looking to into tenure is with the club culture. So as everybody knows, members love seeing similar faces and the service staff that take care of them every day. They love when they know your name. They love when you know their drink, their food allergies, so much stuff they don't even have to worry about. They love when you know your kids and everything like that. So every club has that. Martha has that server that's outlived 6 or 7 dining room managers. And they're always there. They were there raising and taking care of the kids, and now they're working at the kids' wedding. So you see that increase. When you do have that consistency and that tenure, you really do see an increase in member satisfaction. Some other correlations between tenure that we're really going to start looking into is the competitive packages that they offer for compensation and benefits. So if you go back to that line chart and your club is at the 60th percentile and you're really offering competitive rates and benefits, so is that causing your tenure to stay high? Vice versa, if you're paying under the line, under the median, and you don't offer any benefits, what's your tenure look like? Is that increased in 0 to 5 years? Do you have a lot of turnover? So that's definitely something we're really excited to kind of dig deeper into. Some other things with tenure we're going to look into career-wise. We know that a lot of young managers, it's tough to kind of move up vertically and laterally in the vertically in clubs. So a lot of times you'll spend a year or 2, 3 years working at a club and moving horizontally to really get that experience. So seeing if that has any impact in tenure and what we can come from it.
Okay, so this was actually the last part of our analysis before we dove into the specific compensation for Club XYZ. So what we're looking at here is the breakdown of Club XYZ's salary and wages compared to the peer set's breakdown of salary and wages. On average, salary and wages make up 81% of the club's total payroll, with the other 19% being allocated towards payroll taxes and benefits. You can see that even with a lower overall payroll ratio in Club XYZ on the left, their breakdown of salary and wages for executive staff to other staff ends up being an exact match to the peer sets. In general, what has driven our studies in the past and what has driven a lot of clubs in the past was the focus on executive staff compensation, which is only 22% of the total. So what we're hoping to do, and what the HR professionals we've been working with hope to do, is really illuminate this other 78% of the salary and wages that the club has. And so that will be something that we dive into going forward, and hopefully will become more clear for those other 155 positions. In conclusion, our analysis for this club, I believe, proves that they are staffed at a level that is appropriate to their size and complexity, and has been adjusted to meet their new dining and year-round offerings. I also believe that it proves they have managed their wages and benefits to the norm of their peers and for clubs in their revenue size. Ultimately, balancing the financial results for the club and the members' service expectation.
So what's next for Mary and Mike? We're extremely excited to continue doing this research and expanding our comp database. Again, if you'd like to participate in that at all, you can email either one of us, which is on the next slide, or the link on this page. You can write that down, but we'll also be sending out a follow-up email with this link and instructions to do so. Extremely excited for the launch of our new advanced workforce analysis tool. That's coming really soon. We'll also be publishing our 2017 compensation benefits report this fall. And lastly, as you've seen during this presentation, we've been producing a number of custom workforce analysis projects, and we're really looking forward to continuing to deliver that service to individual clubs. So we're going to start taking some questions if you have any. Terry, our Director of Communications, is going to come back on the line and help facilitate that. I will go to the next slide. It does have those 2 passcodes that are for the Florida chapter and the Evergreen chapter. And we're happy to take any questions you may have. We appreciate your time. Again, we know you all have very busy schedules, and you have a club to run. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary and Mike. And you must have done a nice job, because I don't see any questions. Oh, I just got one. Hold on one second. And let me see if I can get to it. Should the executive team's salary and wage be included under G&A or within each individual department expense?
That's a great question. So will you actually go back to that?
Yep.
Third to last slide, I think. This one. So the executive team, as we define it, does include a couple of people in the G&A department, general and administrative department, as well as the department heads. So in our standard organizational chart, we actually put the department heads in their department. So when you look at the labor expense per department, it includes the department head. that we would consider to be part of the executive team. But in this particular slide, we grouped the executive team in one bundle. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay, next question. Can you provide metrics or ways to determine what is appropriate, what the appropriate size of the golf operations staff would be? And I think the answer to that question is we didn't do it in this presentation, but yes, we can, and we will reach out to you afterwards, the person that sent that question. Question after that, does this pay structure include them receiving a service charge or just the base rate?
So to go back up to that slide, so to not dig too deep into it, but kind of to go back to how I talked about the hourly and the salary positions, but also having hybrid positions. So what we do, you'll see up here on the top right, or top left, excuse me, it says effective rate. So our system will take, so when you divide it by hourly and salary, since it could be either, if there are more than 50% that are hourly, it'll show an effective rate that is hourly. If it's more of salary, then it'll show the salary. But also that effective rate, you'll see there's an hourly base rate here in the top left, but underneath that's the effective rate. So our effective rate is encompassing any surcharge if it's on there, or it's encompassing gratuities and lessons and all that. So on here, you'll see this is the effective rate. So these, again, this isn't actual compensation data for you to take and use, but these metrics on the left are including the gratuities and the service charge that the club provide us with.
Okay, and what Mike's saying there is that we altered some of the background data that's showing there just so that we weren't giving anything away directly there. Someone asked for a copy of the org chart that you mentioned, meaning the standardized departments, and we will make sure that that gets to the person that asked for it. If anybody else wants it, you can send an email to Mary or Mike, and they'll help you understand what that standardization was. Next question.
One second, Terry.
Just to add to that, we've been developing that standard organizational chart, and it's pretty set in stone. The next process of that will be to develop some standard job descriptions. That will help us really work with you to clarify how exactly your positions line up with our definitions of those functions in a club. So we're happy to share that with you, but we are also hoping that it will be more of a conversation.
And if you'd like to send us your individual organizational charts too, we're collecting that too. The more data we get, the better. It adds to our research, and we can really highlight some areas and kind of learn, again, to mesh it to cater best to the clubs that we work with.
Great. Someone asked whether the 2,080 hours factors in the holidays.
Meaning holiday pay?
Yes. We haven't factored in the holiday pay, so when we capture the payroll report up here, right here, you'll see there's another column that says their total hours. So unless that club includes that as overtime or in their hours worked, we aren't able to capture that at the moment. And then from that, if we don't get the hours, we assume that anybody's salary and full-time year-round works the 2080 and the part-time vice versa. So we go off of what the hours are provided to us from the club and what we capture in the payroll report.
Okay, next question. Do the labor expenses include or exclude direct pass-throughs like service charges, tips, and lessons?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question one more time?
Do the labor expenses include or exclude direct pass-throughs like service charges, tips, lessons, etc.?
They do. We include that in our salary and wages. So that's captured.
Next question, can you show a calculation for the payroll ratio?
There you are.
Yep, so the payroll ratio is pretty easy to calculate. You take your club's total salary and wages and total payroll taxes and benefits and add them together for the total labor expense, and then you divide that by the club's total operating revenue.
It's also extremely easy to capture if you are a client of Club Benchmarking, and you can go right on the platform and generate this report in less than a minute.
Okay. Should the executive team's salary and wage be included under G&A or, oh, I already asked that one. How transferable are these ratios to smaller clubs? That's a great question.
That is a great question, and something we're in the process of studying now for our annual report is actually how these ratios shift for smaller clubs as well as clubs in different geographic areas or cost of living areas. So we don't know at the moment, but we can definitely get back to you.
Okay. Are the custom reports included in the club benchmarking subscription? And I think the reference is the work that you did as an example for Club XYZ and others part of the platform subscription?
At the moment, it is not part of the platform subscription, and we are working with other clubs to continue to refine that and make it scalable. But if there is some interest in other clubs, if you want to contact Mary and I, we can work with you to see what we can do and generate for you. Again, this is an awesome ongoing process that we're having a ton of fun actually learning and geeking out to, and continuing to grow. So if this is something that you're interested in doing or working with us or have some suggestions, we love the feedback. We've been working with some awesome HR directors and general managers to really push us and continue to push us to provide the stuff that they need to arm them and tool them and give them the tools to go into the board presentation or to teach their staff and help others learn with them.
Okay. Is the plan to have these reports available through the CB reporting site if the necessary data is submitted each year? And I think that references, will it be in the current platform?
It will not be in the current platform. It will be available as an upgrade. And that upgrade, we're hoping to, as the workforce platform, we're hoping to have available soon. We're just a couple of weeks behind schedule there.
Good. Okay, and I got that one to pass through.
This is awesome.
Is there a correlation between server compensation and dining sales volume?
That's interesting. I don't know at the moment.
Yeah, that's something we're going to definitely have to look into, because it's also, you think there's some clubs Friday night, Saturday night, or even Monday night, that clubs that are open, you always have to have somebody there. You don't know if Mr. and Mrs. Jones are going to show up, regardless of if it's summer season and you have to stay open. So that's also something we're battling, or that we're trying to figure out and evolve to, because no matter what, even if a club's dead, you have to be open. The lights have to be on. You never know when they're going to when a member's going to show up and be like, hey, you know, we just got back into town and we're looking to have dinner. How come you were closed? So that's a great question and something that we're really going to have to look into.
Okay, someone asked if there is, oh, hang on just a second. Sorry, I have to scroll up here. What is the best method to determine appropriate golf operations staff size for our club? And I think on that one, the best way to handle that is to have Mary and Mike follow up with you. Mike, you answered another one. Someone asked to please go back to the contact slide because they want to be able to reach you. Last question, and then we're going to close out for today. But obviously, look at the screen there. You can see the code word for Evergreen and Florida right there. Don't forget to email those to your managing director and executive director to get your education credits. Last question: are these percentages based on an 18-hole facility, or does the percentage correlate with 27 or 36 holes? So the question effectively is, does it matter how many holes of golf the club has?
Yeah, so these percentages were clubs with golf, but they were larger clubs, but the number of holes varied. Some were 18-hole clubs and some had 36, I believe.
But if this were a question regarding compensation for the greens and grounds or golf ops, and you're a larger club with 27 holes or a smaller club with 9 holes, that's something that we can filter out and start to see if we have enough information to provide you with that. Because I know the more The more yards you have and the more holes that you have really depends on the amount of money you're spending per hole. So those are some things that we can definitely continue to look into and have fun with.
There are actually more questions rolling in, so I think maybe we'll keep going. We are going to distribute a link to the recording. We're recording this session, and so we'll send that link out after so you can rewatch it and share it. Do you find that the percentage differs broadly between yacht clubs and country clubs?
The payroll ratio? I'm not quite
Or
sure.
any percentages. So at the moment, we probably have 5 to 8 clubs that are actual yacht clubs, maybe a little less. So we're trying to capture more information and payroll reports for the yacht clubs and for the for those smaller clubs, so we can kind of focus on and do a smaller peer set for those. So at the moment, we don't really exactly know about yacht clubs, but something we're definitely looking into.
Okay.
The ratio, though, for clubs without golf is actually lower. I believe it's 49% at the 25th percentile, 53% at the median, and 59% at the 75th. So clubs without golf do have a lower payroll ratio and actually a lower gross margin.
Okay. These questions are tremendous. Do you have any benchmarks on F&B revenue compared to square footage of restaurant space? So that one's kind of outside the realm of this comp and benefits piece, but we can definitely get that information to you. So we'll respond to that person offline.
But we do have benchmarks for based on clubhouse square footage, not necessarily the dining room square footage, but we do capture clubhouse square footage, and we can benchmark off of that metric.
Okay, and I do think that's it. I think for the sake of time, we're going to close out, but please take a look at the screen one more time, look at those email addresses, and remember that the research continues because people are contributing payroll reports and participating in the research. So please consider doing that, participating. Mike, can you roll back one time, one slide, to make sure that they see that page? For instructions on how to participate in the research, you can go to that web address. It's right there on the screen. And it'll be in the follow-up email that we send you in just a little bit here. So with that, I'll say thank you, and we will see you next time around.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.